Los Angeles. Sunshine, shadows, and smog. Street lights and broken glass. Where dreams are made and lambs slaughtered. Koreatown, Little Armenia, the Rolling Twenties. City of Angels, hustlers, dodgers, fast women, and naked ambition. Hillsides and crashing waves. Convertibles and cockroaches. Kissed by God, awaiting his vengeance. And every corner immortalized by the movies.
I went to a bar a couple of weeks ago now. It's a bar I've been to a lot in the past. You know, the one that has those like $5 pitchers of beer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I went to the bar and the pitchers, I don't know if this is the inflation crisis or what, the price of the pitcher has not changed. But the size of the pitcher has gone down considerably. And I complained to the bartender about this. And he told me it was probably because I was just much bigger than I used to be.
Ooh.
When I started going into the bar all those years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. I told him, well, I am big, but it's the pitchers that got small.
But did they have big ears?
No. So that might be the setup for the film we're talking about.
Yes, you'll read the big black headlines about Norma Desmond and this Hollywood scandal. But you'll never read the true story about the rest of us who were part of it. Me, for instance, Joe Gillis, a promising young writer from Dayton, Ohio. And Betty, that nice kid I met at a Hollywood party, who knew nothing about me, but knew what she wanted. Well, we should have lived happily ever after, like they do in the movies. But this was different, because this is a Hollywood story about the people who make the movies. The little ones that you never hear of, like Betty and me. All those who knew Norma Desmond, a strange woman who left her mark on all of us who crossed her path. Has it ever occurred to you that I may have a life of my own, that there may be some girl that I'm crazy about?
Who? Some car hop or a dress extra?
Where are you? What's this all about?
Why don't you come out and see for yourself? The address is 10,086 Sunset Boulevard.
1950s, absolute all-time Hollywood classic, Sunset Boulevard, which is written by Billy Wilder, Charles Brackett, and D.M. Marshman Jr., although there's some debate over how much Marshman actually contributed to anything, because Wilder and Brackett had been a writing team for a long time.
Who is this Marshman character?
I have no idea. I still don't quite know. No one really seems to know. From what I've read, the recollection is that he was kind of around Wilder and Brackett's office, and he may have pitched a couple of ideas. I mean, it was enough to get him a credit from the Writers Guild, so...
Yeah, it looks like his other credits are a movie called Taxi from 1953, which I've never heard of.
Yep.
That stars Dan Daly and Constance Smith. Not familiar. Then a movie called Second Chance, which he has a story and adaptation credit for, which stars maybe my favorite actor, Robert Mitchum. And then he did a Lux Theater episode and an episode of Robert Montgomery Presents.
And that is the conclusion to this episode of D.M. Marshman IMDb.
Yes,
because that is literally all of it.
Yes.
Yeah, he didn't do very much. So as far as I'm concerned, directed by Wilder, written by Wilder and Brackett, starring William Holden, Gloria Swanson, Eric von Stroheim, and Nancy Olson, among others, but I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yes.
And before we get into the synopsis, I just want to go ahead and name check the guy who I consider to be the real star of the film, Franz Waxman, for his outstanding score.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not in the film, but his music is, and it makes the whole thing. If you've never seen Sunset Boulevard, here's a brief synopsis of the beginning, kind of what's going on in the middle. We'll leave the end alone, even though the film has been out for over 70 years. So if you haven't gotten around to it, that's really not our fault. I don't want to spoil the ending for people. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. But we'll give you some setup. Sunset Boulevard is the story of Joe Gillis, William Holden, who is a down-on-his-luck Hollywood screenwriter who is struggling to sell anything, and he's desperate to sell something, a spec script, get an assignment, whatever, because he is desperately in need of money. He is behind on his apartment payments, he's behind on his car payments, he just needs money now. And while running from the repo men who are trying to take his car back, his car, which is an old, like 46 Plymouth, one of the two-door convertibles, blows a tire, and he has to turn into the driveway of a big old Hollywood palazzo on Sunset Boulevard, which turns out to be the home of former movie star Norma Desmond, played by Gloria Swanson. She used to be really big, but she is aching for, well, she still thinks she's big.
And she's still very rich.
Yeah, she goes into that in the film. She's got, she owns 3 blocks downtown, and she's got oil out in Bakersfield. She said she was one of the people who, instead of spending all of the ridiculous wealth that she had, actually invested it in businesses. And so she's able to maintain a very comfortable lifestyle for herself. But she really wants to make a return. She hates the word comeback. She wants to make a return to the big screen, and she's written a script to that end, an adaptation of the biblical story of Salome, and she is going to star in it, despite the fact that Salome is a virginal girl in her teens, and Norma Desmond is a woman in her late 40s, if she's a minute. But she's going to make this comeback picture with Cecil B. DeMille, who used to be her big director. Joe Gillis sees this as an opportunity to work his way into the financial black. He kind of cons his way into her house by offering to be her rewrite man and edit her ridiculously long handwritten script down into something that's a little more coherent and a little better suited for the talkie format. Of course, she insists he won't be able to take the script out of the house, so he'll have to live there. There's a room over the garage, and he sees this as a great opportunity. He can hide out there, stay away from the repo men while he fills up his bank account and gets a couple weeks easy work off this woman, and does not see the trap closing shut around him at that point.
Yes, he becomes not just her co-writer or editor, but her gigolo kept man, and kept in a gilded cage where he really can't leave or doesn't feel like he can leave. And he's kind of a scumbag, so he doesn't make every effort he could to leave. I mean, he's not as locked in as maybe the movie, or rather he tries to make you believe, because he is the narrator of the picture also.
Yes, he is. So that's the setup. Hollywood screenwriter, desperately broke, needs money, goes to home of aging movie queen, gets a job. And from there on, the script kind of branches off into several different directions, one of which you already touched on, which is the two become romantic. He's not really willing to do it at first, but eventually just kind of comes to accept that this is part of the deal. She buys him clothes, she throws a big New Year's party, and he's the only other person invited. He really is a kept man.
But we're leaving out the character played by Eric von Stroheim.
Yes. You want to talk about Max?
Max is an old German man who lives on the property and is her butler, valet, chef. He does everything, and seems to both be an underling and wield secret power, and is kind of ghoulish. The movie has in addition to being a Hollywood satire and a melodrama, there's a monster movie element to it as well.
Oh yeah,
where the house is not literally haunted, but it has the scary house vibe. Max and Norma Desmond are kind of movie monsters. They're a Frankenstein's monster and Igor without perhaps a Dr. Frankenstein. Although you could debate. But you get into all these different genres. In addition to film noir, with William Holden and the snappy dialogue from the director and writer of Double Indemnity, one of the classic film noirs. And in the middle they go to Paramount Pictures at some point to pitch. She thinks she's there to pitch her script, or because DeMille has read her script and loves it. She's really there for a different reason.
Yeah, I don't want to go into what that reason is, because it turns out to be a real gut punch.
Yes.
But she is not there for the reason that she thinks she is. He has read her script. He hates it. He is quite surprised that she's shown up until he finds out what the reason is.
And Cecil B. DeMille plays himself and is quite everyone in this movie is fantastic, and Cecil B. DeMille is fantastic as himself.
I would argue there's one exception to that, but we'll get to her.
Yeah.
And she's another one of those people playing themselves.
But the three, I know who you mean. But the three leads and DeMille are all fantastic. And for a film that's kind of a scabrous take on Hollywood, Cecil B. DeMille is depicted kind of lovingly. He's not depicted as a ghoulish, evil guy. He's depicted as kind of a sweet, smart guy that wants to protect Norma Desmond's feelings. She was a star for him, and he still feels bad that her star is faded and wants to kind of handle her with kid gloves and affection. And then there's a wonderful thing, though, when they go to the movie studios, how everyone regards her as a former star. No one treats her like a joke. They all are impressed that the star has shown up before they go back to the business of their day.
Yep. So that is the second main plot line that is running through the film, is what is going to happen with Norma's script and Norma's comeback attempt. But suffice it to say, although I don't want to go into why she's actually been invited to Paramount Studios, she leaves thinking that the picture is on and begins something that, if it weren't in the film, she really would be a complete monster, but it makes you really sympathize for her, the effort that she works, that getting ready for this film that she thinks is going to happen but is never going to happen. And you feel really bad for her at that point.
I wanted to really hit on this sequence because if there's something that might have changed in the last 70 years, it's probably how an audience regards that sequence. Because what she does is she goes through quite a few beauty regimens and exercise routines and all of this stuff to try to look like a star. And I feel like as a people, we're so much different about not just exercise, but beauty regimens and elective surgeries and all kinds of things like manscaping and stuff. If you're a person who sees the movie for the first time now, your reaction is probably a lot different to that sequence than someone who saw the movie even when I did in probably the late 90s for the first time. Because to me, you said it made you sympathetic with her. The first time I saw the movie, I think it plays as a joke. And, because William Holden is very dismissive of all the things she's doing as being sad, and I think it's supposed to be somewhat comical and enlightening as to what someone would go through to try to do this. But nowadays, none of it seems that far out at all. It seems like what any actor would do, male or female, no matter their age, perhaps.
Yeah. There is a joke. I'm not sure, though, that he regards it as a funny one. I don't get that he's being dismissive. I know what you're hearing, though, but in my ears it comes across as just kind of very distant sympathy. Like, I already know what's going to happen, but you poor dear, look at what you're going through. In this day and age, the idea of personal improvement, surgically, cosmetically, of course, those things are so much more affordable now and so much more available to so many more people than they were in 1950. Of course, she can afford it. She's got the money. She drives around in a car that she bought for, if I remember the figure correctly, $28,000, which today would be the price of a normal commercial, single person vehicle. And in 1950, and she didn't buy it in 1950, she bought it earlier than that, but even if she had bought it in 1950, that's like 5 times or 6 times what the average American household was making in a year. I can't afford to drop 6 years' salary on a car.
No.
So she can definitely afford to drop a bunch of money on cosmetic treatments. But the third plot line, we've talked about the Joe becomes Norma's gigolo. We've talked about Norma's script. But in the middle of all this, Wilder and Brackett pick up a thread that they dropped early on. When Joe Gillis is bumming around town trying to get any work he can, he tries to resurrect an old pitch he gave to Paramount, and it gets shot down hard by a woman in the readers department by the name of Betty Schaefer, who's played by Nancy Olson. And in a lot of movies, I get the sense that that scene where she shoots it down would be her last scene. But it's not, as it turns out. She comes back about halfway through the film and is a very strong presence into the back half of the movie. She looked up some of his other work, and she found a section in one of his spec scripts that she thought was quite good, and she offers to help him turn it into something, to develop it. And as they start writing this script together, they gradually grow closer and closer, which is a problem for a couple of reasons. Number one is that she is actually engaged to one of Joe's good friends, which we'll come back to that later. But the other big reason, of course, is that she has no idea where Joe lives, and she has no idea why he's walking around town in these really fancy clothes, and she has no idea.
That are also kind of crazy, the clothes, because Norma Desmond has picked out the clothes and they are not of today's fashion.
No, he's the most well-dressed man of 1928.
He's got a tuxedo with tails, and things kind of pick up where it's maybe on New Year's he wants to go out for smokes or something, or she does. What do they want to go pick up on New Year's, where then he ends up kind of at Schwab's Drugs running into these people?
It is, in fact, cigarettes. She left her cigarettes at home. She ran out.
Okay. So they go to Schwab's Drugs, which was a huge deal back then. Schwab's Drugs is long gone, unfortunately. What do you know about Schwab's Drugstore?
I know about as much about it as I've seen in Sunset Boulevard and read in a couple of Hollywood biographies. I know that's the place where Lana Turner was famously supposed to have been discovered, and I also know that's not true. But I also know it should have been true, because it's a good story.
Aside from even Lana Turner, it's kind of a joke about, you might get discovered at Schwab's Drugstore was a kind of a thing. Like, it all stood in for being discovered anywhere with Schwab's Drugstore. It was a famous Hollywood landmark. Today, it's a shopping center, like a mini mall, a strip mall, kind of 2-story shopping center on the Sunset Strip. Not far, probably, from the Rainbow Room, which still exists also on the Sunset Strip. It's across the street from Chateau Marmont. And a nightclub called Hyde, where people like Lindsay Lohan would get smashed, and people still go and party today. Hyde is still a popular nightclub. The Rainbow Room is on Sunset Strip next to another very popular nightclub called One Oak. They also mentioned that something will play in Pomona.
Yes.
And so I think that I've never been to Pomona. It is east of Los Angeles. When I was in college, I had a girl in my class who was from Pomona, and she was in one of my film classes, and she and a boy in the class looked very similar, except for one was a boy and one was a girl. And I was in a group when we were making a short film for our final project, and we cast them as doubles in a version of Fyodor Dostoevsky's short story, The Double, or novella, The Double. I think the boy was the original, and then she was his double that comes in, if you're familiar with the story, which has probably been adapted by people making short films for classes for generations. It's one of those movie ideas that really appeals to people of a young age, I feel like. But then all of a sudden she couldn't show up to film her scenes.
Ooh.
And we were halfway through filming because she had gone home for the weekend to Pomona and had participated in a convenience store robbery and been caught on the video camera and arrested.
I feel like we just segued into talking about Drive.
Yeah, so pretty much that seems like the kind of thing that happens in Pomona to me in my head.
Okay.
So we had to...
Did you find a double-double?
What we had to do was tell the teacher, and then we had to cast one of the people in our group as the double who looked nothing like the original person, and so the entire illusion was ruined. Not that it was going to turn out to be any great masterpiece of cinema anyway, but yeah, the illusion was shattered.
Well, thanks, Pomona. So, Sunset Boulevard was made for a little less than $2 million. Did decent enough business at the box office, $5 million or so, but it wasn't a big...
Oh, it wasn't?
It wasn't a big breakout hit. No, it wasn't like it might have been one of the top grossing films of the year, but it was also, of course, pretty expensive for films of that time. But it was a prestige picture, and so it did get nominated for 11 Academy Awards.
Oh, wow.
And it only won 3 out of the 11. Best screenplay, what today it would be, at the time it was best story and screenplay, but today that would be best original screenplay for Wilder, Brackett, and Marshman. Then another award for best art and set direction, black and white, because there were separate awards for black and white and color in several different categories. And then best score for Franz Waxman's.
Oh, this would have been the year that it would have been up against All About Eve.
It ran smack into All About Eve, and All About Eve took 3 awards away from Sunset Boulevard, arguably. Definitely 2. Because it won Best Picture, and Joe Mankiewicz won Best Director over Billy Wilder. And I don't know, George Sanders won Best Supporting Actor, which is the other category. It beat out Sunset Boulevard, and George Sanders beat out Eric von Stroheim, which I think is justified because I love George Sanders.
Yeah, George Sanders in All About Eve is like Joe Pesci in Goodfellas. I mean, everybody has good lines in that movie, but George Sanders, everything he says is
just perfect.
That's not he did not steal that award here. He earned it.
No,
he's got a great role.
That's fair. Sunset Boulevard holds a very unusual and unfortunate distinction. It's one of only 3 films in Hollywood history to be nominated for all 4 acting Oscars without winning a single one of them.
You know, like so many years, not so many years recently, but in the past, before, say, 2015, there were so many years where it was hard to fill a Best Actress category with 5 great, roles and performances. Think about that year with Norma Desmond, Gloria Swanson, and then Eve, and I forget who the character that...
Margot Channing.
Or
Betty Davis.
Betty
Margot
Channing.
And then Eve Baxter. Or Ann Baxter,
yeah.
Eve Harrington, sorry.
Yeah, it's Eve.
So those 3 were all up against each other for the Best
all
Actress.
lost.
And they all lost to Judy Holliday for the very
Born Yesterday.
Born Yesterday.
Oh, that's a good movie too. Born Yesterday is a good movie.
This is the thing. It's a good movie, but it's not. When you look back at the films that were released this year, there are 2 that are head and shoulders above all of the others. And they're the 2 we were just talking about.
What else was released that year?
Interestingly enough, Born Yesterday also had William Holden in it.
Yes.
So he had the pleasure of supporting a woman to her Oscar. It just wasn't the one everyone thought it was going to.
Looks like other big winners were Samson and Delilah, which would have been Cecil B. DeMille. Is that the movie that Cecil B. DeMille's actually making when they visit him in...
I think it is, actually.
In Sunset Boulevard. And then Jose Ferrer won Best Actor for Cyrano de Bergerac, which I've never seen.
Yeah, this is also the year of Harvey.
Panic in the Streets, L.A. Kazan movie.
Yeah, Harvey, the movie where Jimmy Stewart has a 6-foot invisible rabbit friend. Let's see. The original Father of the Bride.
Oh, wow.
Came out that year, Spencer Tracy. Not Steve Martin. He's not that old.
He just always looked that old because of his hair.
He really has. And that's also the year of Cinderella.
Oh, what a great movie. And it had Treasure Island, Where the Sidewalk Ends. This was a really good year for movies. In a Lonely Place, the Nicholas Ray movie.
That's right.
Well, so there were two failed screenwriter movies. That were big. Because In a Lonely Place is quite a good movie about a screenwriter as well.
I know it by reputation only. I've never seen In a Lonely Place.
Let's see what else is on here. Man, they had some good ones this year.
But
The Asphalt Jungle.
But even so, Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve are two of the all-time greats.
Rashomon.
Yeah. That's something that no one in Hollywood would have been hip to at the time. We can only comment on that one in hindsight. Kurosawa doing some very interesting things across the big pond.
The movie that I really love that isn't maybe one of the most popular movies is The Wagon Master.
I've never seen The Wagon Master.
It's another John Ford movie. Excellent Western. Yeah, very good year. But Sunset Boulevard might be the best picture out of all those pictures.
I would argue that it definitely is. It actually did win several Best Picture awards, including at the Golden Globes, where it also won Best Director, but interestingly enough, not Best Screenplay.
Another thing about this movie that's great is the cinematography. There is one shot in the movie where William Holden is walking in the background of the house on a stairway, and all of a sudden Eric von Stroheim pops into frame, and my initial thought after seeing so many modern movies was, what a great use of rack focus, and I thought, no wait, they're probably definitely using deep focus, which was such a big deal back then, especially in the 40s. But this is only 1950. There are a few examples of really good use of deep focus in the movie. Also, just William Holden is great in the movie.
Yeah.
And so is Gloria Swanson.
Yeah.
Who is totally giving a performance. She's almost like, because she was a silent movie star who had been in several films directed by Eric von Stroheim, you kind of almost think, if you're like me and don't watch a lot of silent films, that she might be that character more or less, but she's totally giving a performance. It's very much a turn.
No, she was supposed to be one of the nicest people you could ever possibly hope to work with.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she would go on to do more after this. This was not the end of her career.
It was not the end of her career, but it was definitely the capstone.
Oh, yeah.
It also won Best Picture of the Year from the National Board of Review, and it was part of the first class of films inducted into the National Film Registry, the film preservation at the Library of Congress.
A couple of things with our last episode of our other program, that we did the movie Limelight, which featured Buster Keaton in a small role. This movie also features Buster Keaton in a small role.
It does.
And you thought about picking Eraserhead as a match with the Fabelmans. This movie also has a tie to David Lynch, who was in The Fabelmans. Several
Ties to David Lynch, actually, yeah. There are some people who would argue that Mulholland Drive is David Lynch's attempt to remake Sunset Boulevard. He does a shot of the Paramount Gate, very similar to the shot of the Paramount Gate. With, interestingly enough, in that shot, you can see an Isotta Fraschini car, which is exactly like the one in this movie. And the reason it's exactly like the one in this movie is because it's the one in this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Lynch went out and found that car to park it on the Paramount lot for that shot.
Another one of the big things is that Cecil B. DeMille's assistant is a man named Gordon Cole. Who is?
Well, I got hold of Gordon Cole.
Did you see them? Did you see how they came?
You know, some crazy things happen in this business, Norma. I hope you haven't lost your sense of humor. What's the matter, dear?
Nothing. I just didn't realize what it would be like to come back to the old studio.
The name is Gordon Cole, and I couldn't help but notice you from the booth. And, well, seeing your beauty now, I feel as though my stomach is filled with a team of bumblebees.
You don't have to shout, I can hear you.
David Lynch's character in Twin Peaks, director of the FBI, Gordon Cole.
Yes.
Yes, and there's actually a little clip from Sunset Boulevard plays in Twin Peaks season 3, not to give a spoiler for Twin Peaks season 3, but it specifically name-checking Gordon Cole. And there's some ties in Inland Empire too, although Inland Empire is one we're going to have to tackle at some point, but I'm not ready for it yet. As far as I'm concerned, this is the Hollywood movie about Hollywood. No one has ever done a better job of it. There have been several attempts and come close. I know you weren't a big fan of Singing in the Rain, but I love Singing in the Rain, which is a very similar kind of generic. It involves a silent film queen whose career is basically at that point about to end. But Singing in the Rain gives it to us in laughs, whereas Sunset Boulevard does it in drama.
But also, this movie, if you've never seen the movie, this movie also has laughs.
Oh, it does.
There's certainly a sense of humor going on in this movie. That's what makes it such a great movie, is the stories involving. It has laughs, it has tension, it has some thrills. It's a spectacular movie.
Yeah. It is at the very least in the first rank of Hollywood movies about Hollywood. It's right up there with Singing in the Rain and The Player.
The Player, which is, I was thinking, another movie we might have to look at.
Oh, definitely. I'm always happy to revisit The Player.
Yes.
That pretty much covers the basics of Sunset Boulevard. Is there any particular moment that stood out to you?
Yes, there are also some other mentions of things in L.A. At some point they mentioned the Black Dahlias the killing. They mentioned the street Las Palmas, which is fairly close to my apartment. They also mention a place called Perino's. Is that where they get the suit? I'm not familiar with that.
It's right across the street from where they get the suit.
Oh, that's where I saw the sign.
You saw the sign through the window.
Yes. I made that note and didn't remember why. Mm-hmm. And there's also, I think you go to the beach in probably Santa Monica. I'm not sure where they end up at the beach at some point. And then a little bit of his apartment at, I think it's Altoledo, and which is on Franklin and Ivar. Mm-hmm. And I think those apartments might still be there.
They still are there.
On Franklin and Ivar. The house in Sunset Boulevard is not actually on Sunset Boulevard. I think it still stands.
It does not.
Oh,
no, it does not stand anymore. 641 South Irving, it's been gone for almost 70 years at this point. It was demolished in the late 50s. It actually was once owned by the Getty family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The highlight of the movie that we didn't cover.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
This is our time. A race is like you're good, you know what I mean? You know how many times somebody told me I was good in my life? Twice. This race today and dancing at the disco.
This is the one. This is the one I'll be remembered for.
The funeral for the ape.
Such a bizarre scene. Mm-hmm. This is when William Holden gets to Gloria Swanson's mansion. She thinks he's there because he's an undertaker, and she's called for an undertaker to bring a coffin for a funeral for her pet ape.
And there's some debate that I think maybe Billy Wilder answered in the affirmative sometime after the picture was made of whether or not the ape might have also been a gigolo.
Yes, and the answer to that question was yes, which he put an allusion to in the dialogue of the movie, if I remember right, that he always liked fires and liked poking at them with a stick. Which is about as close as you can get in Hays Code Hollywood to implying something that you can't say out loud.
Yeah, and another highlight is just any revelation about Eric von Stroheim's character.
Yeah.
Which we've avoided spoiling for people who haven't watched the movie, but you learn a number of things about his character throughout the film, and they're always a good moment of the movie to me.
Yeah. One of the highlights for me is the moment, actually, you already touched on this earlier, but the moment when she comes into the Cecil B. DeMille's shooting for Samson and Delilah, she has a seat, and she's got this feather hat, or this feather in her hat, I should say, and a sound microphone comes sliding in from off screen
yes.
and disrupts her hat. She sees it and she just brushes it away contemptuously. And then, you've got that great scene where someone up in the rafters recognizes her, trains a spotlight on her, and everybody comes around. It's Norma Desmond. I thought she was dead. It's
what about the famously misquoted line? I believe it's Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Yep.
Usually said the other way around, which made me think, or did not make me think, but recently I was thinking about movies that everybody knows the quote, but they don't know the movie. This is not one of those. I think a lot of people watch Sunset Boulevard still. But two I came up with were, this whole courtroom's out of order. I'm out of, which, do you know the movie?
I don't.
And Justice for All.
Okay.
Starring Al Pacino. And then the other one, another movie I watched recently and was like, oh, I'm not sure I ever knew what movie this was from, is, you know how to whistle, don't you? Just put your lips together.
I know exactly what movie that's from, and that's one I want to cover in the not too distant future, yeah.
That does not take place in Los Angeles.
Does it not?
No. What movie did you think it was?
I thought it's from The Big Sleep.
It's from To Have and Have Not, which stars the stars of The Big Sleep.
Okay. Well, I definitely want to.
The movie they did before
the Big Sleep. Well, we definitely have to talk about The Big Sleep.
We sure do. In fact, this whole show could just be Philip Marlowe films.
It really could. I gotta think this is a literary illusion. William Holden has just arrived at the house and he's walking around the property, and then Gloria Swanson calls to him from off screen. She says something along the lines of, "What took you so long?" And when we see her, she's shrouded on a balcony above the whole, which kind of foreshadows the whole, he's Romeo and she's Juliet. She's being introduced on a balcony. And her first line of dialogue is basically, "What took you so long?" Which is just fantastic. And some great musical allusions as well. Buttons and Bows, the old Hollywood standby, with slightly rewritten lyrics, which kind of point up William Holden's circumstances, and then an allusion in the cigarette case to the song Mad About the Boy.
Oh, yes.
Which, if you've never read the lyrics to Mad About the Boy, if you've never heard the song, don't listen to it before you see Sunset Boulevard, because it will give away the ending. You have been warned.
What about, at some point, he mentions, or she mentions, taking a pair of shears and a blue pencil to the thing. What about blue pencils? You don't hear too much about those anymore.
Yeah, editing. He would be very familiar with that, because before he came to Hollywood to make his money in the screenwriting profession, he was a copy editor from Dayton, Ohio. The movie makes a point. So he knows his way around a blue pencil.
Gloria Swanson sounds so much like a character name that I almost keep wanting to call the person Norma Desmond. Mm-hmm. But what about William Holden and Billy Wilder and Eric von Stroheim's careers?
Yeah, Billy Wilder's career was basically 4 decades of turning out some of the best pictures that Hollywood has ever made. He is responsible for the screenplay for Ninotchka, which got him his first Academy Award nomination, if I remember correctly. You already mentioned Double Indemnity, which he co-wrote with Raymond Chandler, and he directed that. He won 2 Academy Awards for The Lost Weekend with Ray Milland. And then after Sunset Boulevard, this was actually the last picture. He and Brackett wrote quite a few movies together, but this is the last one they wrote together.
Oh, really?
Yeah, after this, and I still don't know the story on that. I'm not sure anyone ever will now, because Wilder very famously never spoke about it, and Brackett never seemed to quite know what had happened to end their partnership. But he went on to find another writing partner, I.A.L. Diamond, and would go on over the last parts of his career to create movies like Stalag 17, also with William Holden, and that's where Holden got his Oscar.
Yeah, this is one of 3 just absolutely perfect movies with William Holden and Billy Wilder, in my opinion. This one, Stalag 17, and Sabrina.
Which was his very next picture after Stalag 17.
I love all 3 of those movies. And they're all movies that could go terribly awry.
Yep. And Sabrina, again, pretty much a perfect movie in my not so humble opinion in this case.
I love it.
Some Like It Hot, also a Billy Wilder film.
Never seen Some Like It Hot.
Oh, dude. Well, we can't do it on this podcast, but we'll have to do it some other time. He won 3 Oscars as producer, director, and writer for The Apartment. He got into a Jack Lemmon kick late in his career.
Yes.
Did Billy Wilder, Some Like It Hot, The Apartment, Irma La Deuce, which is one of my favorites of all time in the screwball comedy genre.
Have not seen it. Have seen The Apartment.
Yeah.
Oh, did he do for the front page with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon?
Yeah, the 70s one.
I have not seen that. Was on TV the other day. I've seen the old one. How do you feel about The Apartment? It's one of the most beloved motion pictures of people of all time.
It's a very depressing film.
I don't care for it.
I recognize its genius, but it's not something I'm going to pull up when I want to have a good time.
You know what movie is not good? Love in the Afternoon. Have you seen that one? That's the one with Audrey Hepburn and Gary Cooper. Mm-hmm. That's a romantic film that to me does not work. I think Maurice Chevalier might also be in that one.
Okay. I've never seen that one, so I can't.
Don't give it a thumbs up. Double Indemnity and the three with I also love 1, 2, 3, the Billy Wilder movie with James Cagney as a Coca-Cola executive that goes behind the Iron Curtain to sell Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. And that's just pretty much a straight up comedy that I think is really good. Mm-hmm. And
let's see,
Ace in the Hole.
Oh, Ace in the Hole, absolutely.
Which was right in this run. Yeah. Sunset Boulevard kind of kicks off a run of some of the classics.
Yeah, Ace in the Hole was the year after, if I remember right. Wasn't it 51?
Yeah, that might be the one directly after.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah. Charles Brackett, of course, wrote a bunch of stuff with Billy Wilder, Ninotchka. Quite a few films I've never seen, The Major and the Minor, Five Graves to Cairo. But he also co-wrote The Lost Weekend and won an Oscar for that. And after this was over, he still won one more screenwriting Oscar in '53 for Titanic. And then stepped back into more of a producer's role for the last part of his career, like The King and I. He was the producer on The King and I. William Holden. Is this William Holden's best film?
No. William Holden's best film to me is The Wild Bunch.
That is an all-time classic.
And these 3 Billy Wilder movies, The Wild Bunch and Network, could be the Golden 5 Holden movies to me.
You are forgetting Bridge on the River Kwai.
That's a Golden movie too.
Yeah, William Holden, I've got this theory, and William Holden is one of my prime examples of it, that movie stars are movie stars in part because they have a type, and when they play to that type, it's usually their best performances. Like John Wayne is the cowboy, Marilyn Monroe is the sex pot, and William Holden is the guy who looks good and is really a slimeball. Not that he was that way in real life, by any means, not from what I can tell, but those are the parts he does really well. The guy who looks like he should be a Greek god, but
that's the young William Holden, though. The older William Holden, to me, it's almost unbelievable that he is the young William Holden. Like in The Wild Bunch, to compare how handsome he is in this movie or in Sabrina to how he looks in The Wild Bunch or Network.
He did not age
He enjoyed the drink.
Yeah.
And he's really gone to see, but he's also not playing the William Holden character in either Network or Wild Bunch that he would be playing in Stalag 17 or in this or in he's kind of different in I don't know, I guess in a way he is kind of the Greek god who's kind of a little bit of a slime ball in Sabrina, but he's more of a playboy.
He's not a slime ball, he's a scoundrel.
Yes.
He's a wastrel, he's a cad in that movie. He's not as good as he should be.
No.
Based on the way he looks. And those are his best roles. And Sunset Boulevard slots right in there as one of his. If he is a movie star for that reason, this is one of the performances you got to look to.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know that I guess I'd seen Stalag 17, But an older woman was once saying that she thought that William Holden was the handsomest man in the history of movies. I had in my mind The Wild Bunch, and I was like, what is she talking about? And then you see this movie, and you're like, oh yeah, he's really handsome.
Even in this one, though, he's very, and I don't mean to stamp on the man's memory, he's very blandly handsome.
I don't know, to me he has that weird look where it's like, he's not, sometimes there's a guy who's too blandly handsome for his own good. I call it the James Marsden effect.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Where it's like he just looks exactly like a model.
Sorry to our fellow Oklahoman, James Marsden.
Who's also a very good actor.
Oh, but he is so good. Mm-hmm. Like, seriously. And he never gets enough credit.
I have a theory that's probably wrong.
Yeah.
You know the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I do.
So the Cliff Booth role was written for Tom Cruise.
I'm glad that didn't happen.
See, I think the movie would actually, as great as Brad Pitt is in the movie, he's great in it. I think it would be even funnier to see Tom Cruise fixing someone's satellite TV or fighting Bruce Lee would actually have added an extra layer to the movie. However, the casting of the movie, Leonardo DiCaprio would probably have to be somebody else because Tom Cruise is not a good double for Leonardo DiCaprio. And I was wondering if it might be James Marsden that Tom Cruise would have been the older stunt double for, but I don't know who would be the Tom Cruise Rick Dalton.
I could see that actually. Have you ever seen Dead to Me?
No.
He's great in that. Playing exactly the kind of role that William Holden would be playing if he were in TV today, I think. Let's see.
Our fathers went to high school with James Marsden's parents.
Are you serious?
Yeah, like one night I was bringing up that James Marsden was from Oklahoma, watching it at Westworld with my dad, and my dad was like, I vaguely remember a Marsden that was a really handsome guy, and he was like in love with this beautiful cheerleader or something, and then they just kind of disappeared after high school. Maybe he didn't even it seemed like maybe he was trying to become a model or something, and we looked it up, and sure enough, they were James Marsden's parents.
Gloria Swanson, let's talk about where this slots into her career.
Yeah.
Because she really was a silent movie queen, and she was one of Paramount's biggest stars. When Norma Desmond says in the film that without me, there wouldn't be any Paramount Studios.
That's actually true.
That's actually pretty true. And I don't remember where I saw this, but I read this years ago. You may not remember this, but the old Paramount logo was like, it had a comet and then like little stars.
No, I don't.
With like pictures of their big movie stars. And when Gloria Swanson went in to talk about doing Sunset Boulevard, she was wondering if she was on there, and she looked at the faces and found Hope and Crosby, fairly near the front because they were pretty big. And she was like, okay, well, I'm going to look further back. And she looked all the way back and was like, I'm not anywhere up there. I mean, I know it's been a while since I did a movie, but that kind of hurts. And then someone she mentioned that, and someone said, you should have looked in the other direction. She was the star at the head of the comet. Even at that point, like 20 years after her heyday, that's how big she was. She got 2 Academy Award nominations right at the beginning of Hollywood for Sadie Thompson and The Trespasser, neither of which I've seen. What I have seen is Queen Kelly, which caused her to take a step away from Hollywood for a little while, as Hollywood was transitioning from silent to sound. And a lot of people kind of assumed that, I guess without any evidence, that she was one of those silent stars who couldn't make it in the sound industry, like quite a few of them couldn't.
Which was also directed by
Erich von Stroheim, which is that is one of the all-time great moments in Sunset Boulevard, because it's footage from Queen Kelly.
Oh.
That's the footage we see of her in her heyday. Cast out this wicked dream which has seized my heart. She walked off the movie when she realized that she was playing the madam of a brothel, which did not sit well with her. It was something that Erich von Stroheim had tried to keep.
Oh, that's right. It had been kind of changed ostensibly to a dance hall or something.
Yep.
Yes, I remember the story now.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it is literally the director of Queen Kelly screening a scene from Queen Kelly for the star of Queen Kelly, Only it might be Queen Kelly, but they're not, of course, the same people.
I've never seen another movie with Gloria Swanson. This is the only time I've ever seen her.
I think it's the only time most people have seen her, and because it's just such a captivating role. And she did continue to act after this, but mostly stepped away again from acting in films because she said in the aftermath she got a bunch of scripts from people who were asking her to play a Norma Desmond knockoff. And she was just like, I'm not going to do that. I've got too much integrity. Let's talk about Erich von Stroheim. So, one of the great directors of the silent era who basically scuttled his own career. Have you ever seen Greed?
Oh, I've started Greed and not been able to get into it very much.
That's been my experience.
It's supposed to be really excellent, but I've probably never seen past the first 5 minutes of Greed.
Yeah, that is.
I hate to say.
That is also my experience with Greed. It was very famously. It wasn't an unfinished picture. He did finish it, but his first cut was an audience abusing 9 hours.
Wow.
And unsurprisingly, the studio decided they weren't willing to release a 9-hour movie. It cost over $600,000 to make, which in 1924 is just a phenomenal amount of money to spend. It didn't take back even half of that at the box office, even at its ridiculously shortened form. He had several movies like that, which basically tanked his career, and he didn't direct any films after the early 1930s. That is pretty much Erich von Stroheim.
Yeah, he had many acting credits. He acted in, I guess, 77 things. I don't think I've seen any of... Oh, he's in Five Graves to Cairo. That's right, he plays Rommel.
Okay.
In Five Graves to Cairo.
That's right. I never have seen Five Graves to Cairo.
Yeah. Now that I think, yeah. He's pretty good in that as well. It's like a World War II African theater arsenic and old lace. It's kind of a spy movie. It's a British officer trying to hide out in a hotel in Africa with the Nazis in town.
Mm-hmm.
And these people trying to hide him in different parts of the hotel, and him trying to get secrets and stay alive, basically. But it's a comedy.
Okay.
Some people really like it. I think Quentin Tarantino mentioned on something recently where he thought it was a good movie, but I didn't really care for it. Stroheim is good in it, though.
Okay. Speaking of things that didn't really work for you, I'm assuming you were talking about Nancy Olson earlier.
Yeah, I thought she's all right, but she's not on the level of the other people.
She's not, and that really hurts me to say. She's fine. Don't get me wrong.
Terrible.
No, she's good, but she's not. And yet, this is the movie that would end up defining her entire career because she was never in anything this groundbreakingly successful again.
No, we talked about this in the movie when we were talking about The Great Illusionist. What's the movie called? Not The Great Illusionist. What is it? Von Stroheim in The Grand Illusion?
Oh, was he? Oh my gosh, I don't remember. And I've seen The Grand Illusion. That's really embarrassing. He might be. He might be the German officer.
Yeah, so,
it is.
Yeah, that might be the best movie he's in. That's up there with this movie in quality.
It certainly is. So,
we were talking about what's the movie with Tony Curtis we were talking about?
The Great Race?
No, The Grand Imposter.
The Great Imposter.
Great Imposter.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I keep seeing The Great Race coming on things, and I mean to watch it.
I will tell you, I just literally rewatched that movie 5 days before we're taping this.
Wow.
And I really liked it when I was 8 or 9. It doesn't quite hold up. And that one hurts because it's got a great cast. Tony Curtis, Natalie Wood, Jack Lemmon, Peter Falk.
Yeah, it's a great cast.
It is a great cast. And Keenan Wynn.
Oh, wow.
In a really meaty supporting role, plus Vivian Vance.
I don't know her.
Ethel.
Oh,
from I Love Lucy.
yes.
Yeah, which is probably what she's most famous for, would be my guess.
The women in The Great Illusion, or The Great Imposter, we were talking about how, like, many women, it seemed like were so good and not in that much, or not, like, just kind of would be in something, disappear. When we get into The Big Sleep, that's also like that, where there are just a number of beautiful women in small roles in this movie. You're like, what happened to her? What happened to her? What happened to her?
Mm-hmm. So, when it comes to Nancy Olson, have you ever seen her in anything else?
Good question.
Have you ever seen Fred McMurray? What was it? Absent-Minded Professor?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
she's in that.
One of the first black and white movies I ever saw. My cousins had a weird phase where they got into the Absent-Minded Professor movies, and I watched those, and probably those and the Universal Monster movies would be the first black and white films I ever saw.
Yep. So I saw Nancy Olson in that, like, literally a couple of decades before I saw Sunset Boulevard for the first time. Way too long for me to remember.
Oh yeah, me too.
And she was. They were really trying to make her a thing in the aftermath of Sunset Boulevard. Paramount teamed her with William Holden on at least 2 other projects, and maybe more. And they were all relatively successful, I think, but she never caught on.
And that covers those guys, but you were going to bring up a low light.
I was attacked. 2 kids tried to set me on fire.
Oh my God!
No, I'm not all right. I'm hurt, I'm pissed, gotta find a new job.
They're all trying to kill me. I mean, I just wanted to leave. You know, my apartment, maybe meet a nice girl. And now I've gotta die for it?
Really? Worst film you ever saw? Well, my next one will be better. Hello?
Of a different actress in the movie.
I was. So, this is one of the reasons this is a great Hollywood picture, is because it has real Hollywood figures in it. Cecil B. DeMille, we've talked about. You mentioned Buster Keaton, although you didn't mention Anna Q. Nilsson or H.B. Warner, who were the other of the Waxworks figures.
Yes, they come over and play cards.
Classic silent film actors. And in Buster Keaton's case, at one point, literally one of the biggest stars of all time. But unfortunately, the downside of that is that we also get a scene from Hedda Hopper.
Yes.
Who is Hedda Hoppering all over the place. Really, I don't want to go into the details of that scene, but it comes right at the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. And it's so damaging.
Yes, in fact, I'd forgotten that she was in the movie. And her name is in the opening credits when they mention who's in the movie, I believe. It says
it is, yeah.
Maybe even an and Hedda Hopper. So at some point you see Hedda Hopper's name. The whole movie I'm like, where's Hedda Hopper? Where's Hedda Hopper? Then at the end she pops up and I was like, oh, there's Hedda Hopper.
Yeah, she comes in right at the perfect moment to just take the air out of the balloon. It is one of the few small missteps that Sunset... I would still basically call this a perfect movie.
It is a perfect movie.
But you know she was only in there because they were trying to get some good publicity. Because, come on. It's...
I mean, obviously she was such a Hollywood figure with so many other knowing Hollywood things that she's somebody maybe the audience could recognize and know that get the joke, basically.
Oh, I'm sure. But I like people playing Hedda Hopper much more than I like Hedda Hopper playing Hedda Hopper. When Tilda Swinton does Hedda Hopper, basically, in Hail Caesar.
Hail Caesar, great movie.
Or Jean Smart in Babylon, which we saw together.
Yes.
Those are great Hedda Hoppers. As it turns out, Hedda Hopper is a third-rate version of herself. I've got one other small one, and it's at the Hollywood party scene when Bill Holden abandons the mansion and goes to try and find some young people and some life. I could have done with a little less cloying in the dialogue between him and Nancy Olson.
And they're kind of arch, like them playing a scene from a bad movie.
And it is not something
as a joke.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work.
It doesn't really work. But you know what? It probably worked better in 1950 than it does today. Because those movies were much more in vogue than they are today. So what would be your nominee for most LA moment? You having been and still being a resident of Los Angeles. Because I know what mine is.
This whole movie is an LA moment. I'm thinking it might have to be that montage of her getting ready for the movie, but it's hard to debate the Schwab's drugstore too.
Yeah, those are both good picks.
I think I'm going to go with her getting ready for her big movie role as Salome. That montage is probably our most LA thing. The monkey funeral.
It's right up there.
Oh man, this one has a lot of very LA moments.
It really does. If I were going to limit myself to one and not to double up on any of those,
but I'm going to go with that montage.
The montage is a great choice. For me, the most LA moment is actually a very sly line of dialogue followed by a very sly look when Norma's taking Joe clothes shopping and she's getting him fitted for a tux.
Oh, this is a great line.
Yeah, and of course he also has to get an overcoat because again he's going to be the best dressed man of 1928.
Yes,
and she wants to get in camel's hair, but the salesman suggests getting a vicuna coat, which is in case you didn't know. Dear listener, a vicuna is a South American relative of the llama, which has even softer fur.
And as long as the lady is paying for it,
why not take the vicuna? Followed by just the most leering, and you can tell, like Bill Holden is looking at him, and then he looks down, and the guy never takes his eyes off Bill Holden with that.
It's one of the best moments of the movie.
You know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. We won't say it, but we know.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great pick. It's also just a great moment to highlight of the movie.
Yeah. Now that's I'm just a country boy. I've only been to Los Angeles once, but that's my pick.
Great pick.
For most LA moment of the movie. We talked about some of the locations. There are really only two big locations that you can still go to see. One of them is the Chateau Altenito, if you're interested, which is, and I have the address here, 1851 North Ivar Avenue in Hollywood, it is right at the corner of Franklin and Ivar, as William Holden narrates in the beginning credits, and then in the beginning monologue. And then the other location that is still standing is at 5555 Melrose.
The Paramount Studios.
Paramount
which you can
Studios.
tour every day.
Which you can tour, although you no longer go in through that arch, if I understand correctly.
Oh, really?
That's now in kind of the middle of the lot.
Oh, the photographs still show that wonderful gate, though.
Yeah, you can see it, and you can walk right by it if you go on the tour. But that's no longer apparently the front gate to the studio. It's now inside. So, and then there's one other location. You had mentioned Perino's earlier, which is, and you were wondering what that was. I happen to know. It used to be one of the big Hollywood restaurants. One of the big hangouts for the stars.
What was its address?
It was at two different locations. The one you're seeing in the film is probably the one that used to be at 3927 Wilshire.
Okay.
Although later, sometime in 1950, it moved down the street to 4101. I'm guessing it's the 3900s block location.
Oh, wow. So that would be East Hollywood, which is also known as Koreatown.
Okay. Well, we still haven't talked about who stole it.
If you had the chance, unemployed now, to walk away with $500,000, would you take it?
That's what we need to do. Rob a bank.
We need to take it intact from several men who will be intent on preventing us.
Stopwatch?
Check.
Pocket laser?
Check.
Infrared reflex?
Check.
Portable detonator?
Check.
Whoopee cushion.
I think it's in the bus.
I do what I do best. I take scores. You do what you do best. Trying to stop guys like me.
No, we sing the Jews.
We got to talk about that.
I'm going to go with Von Stroheim.
Von Stroheim? It would be too much of a cop-out to say Gloria Swanson. It was set up for her to steal, so that's not fair. Yeah, so I am going to go in a different direction and say Franz Waxman. whose amazing score. He actually won an Oscar for this score and then won another one the next year for A Place in the Sun. Those are his
another one of my
two-
favorite movies.
Yeah, and he's a great composer, but for me, like the combination of like the old Hollywood orchestral score with the kind of jazz riffs that inspire, like the Joe's theme, which is do 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 do. It's perfect. It's just a perfect score for a perfect film.
Great movie. Next episode, we'll be taking an easy ride to somewhat south in LA. If you can figure out, so the audience, that you can try to figure out what movie we'll be watching.
Easy ride to south of LA. Okay.
Not south of LA, south of Hollywood.
South of Hollywood. Will we be hopping south of Hollywood?
Yes, we might be. We might not be head hopping, but we might be hopping.
Oh, thank God for that.
And yeah, you will not see Hollywood at all in the next episode.
So, with that, I'm Mason.
I'm Matt.
And tune in next time for another episode of LA Movies, where we will look at the City of Angels from another angle.
All right, let's get more beer.
Yes, please.
LA Movies. LA Movies.